Welcome back to Spider-Man Edge of Time
Alright, class, it's time for another session.
of time travel. Don't worry, Jova, there's a payoff to that gag for the credits.
Oh, it's like,
Oh,
do you need,
yes,
do you need me? Oh, Joe, but do you need me to explain the concept of bullshit time travel like I did in the 13.2 playthrough?
Believe it or not, Pedro,
Oh.
this game has a special lesson in BS time travel that you have not yet seen before. Trust me. Let me put it like this. You thought 13.2's concept of time travel was stupid? This kind of takes it to a new level, as you'll come to see.
Okay, again, this here makes things even weirder. Apparently, Anti-Venom just destroying place of the old Alchemax building causes quantum causality. Despite the fact that I thought that the game so far established that due to the chronolink, Peter's action would have caused quantum causalities. So, which is it, game?
Let's point out another problem. Okay, certain stuff appears because Peter apparently affects it. However, when we take into the concept of stuff, considering how we're going to end up where we started at the certain start of the game here, that would mean that Peter was destined to wreck time here and there, which doesn't make sense when you factor in how time in this game supposedly works.
Mm-hmm.
Confused?
Again,
It gets worse.
there's always so much time I can quote to Yu-Gi-Oh! Bridge the Bonds Beyond Time, where you say essays to Janet that is not how time travel works.
Yeah. Like,
Well, to be fair, there's no actual real way of how time travel works, so you can technically be flexible about how you can create your own. It's just a matter of how consistent you are within your own story. As long as you're consistent.
In that kind of sense, usually there are the two schools of thought that DBZ Bridge actually explains with Bulma saying to future Trunks the idea that yes, the changes happen instantaneously. So events that need to be changed from the past reflect on the future immediately, but with the precognition, also changing like you mentioned, because otherwise it keeps creating paradoxes and you'll never get out of it. Or the more preferred one, for example, also by me, multiverse theory. As soon as you change something in the past, you split essentially the timeline into two. The one that also Back to the Future uses.
It depends on what type of time travel serves the story that the writer is trying to tell. The better. There's only two as far as I'm concerned. There's only two obligatory rules. You have to be consistent with your time travel. Once you establish that a logic of time travel, you have to be consistent. You cannot break those rules. Otherwise, it just becomes unbelievable. And
does that mean you're okay with the concept of?
Hold on, I'm about to get.
Changing?
I was about to get to that actually. However, that being said, your rules still have to make some kind of common sense. Like you can't just spit in the face of all basic common sense, like saying that changing the future somehow affects the past, because that literally defies any amount of sense. Yes, I get it. It's sci-fi. It's not realistic, but there has to be some element to make it believable. You can't there's science fiction and there's science bullshit.
Honestly, the only video game involving major time travel that I can think keeps things on a consistent level so far in the entire history of video gaming to me is Chrono Trigger. Aside from that, I can't think of any major example. Even in sequel Chrono Cross, I argue fucked up things.
Let me put it like this, Jova. I think Linkara was the one who put it best. Suspension of disbelief doesn't just throw away all logic. It just allows us to believe that time travel can exist, or that superheroes can exist, or something like that. But that doesn't mean the writer is now allowed to just do whatever the fuck he wants, regardless of whether or not it makes any amount of sense. Just
True that.
I mean, it should at least make sense in the universe being written.
And even then, Shiroi.
Doesn't make coherent sense. Then what's the point of having a plot?
Yeah, exactly. Like from the moment Final Fantasy 14.2 tells us that affecting the future somehow affects the past, what you're basically telling me is that your time travel doesn't work in any way that's even remotely logical.
Not at all. Remember, Pedro, there was also the fact that even in the interviews they mentioned, in order to keep the plot to not be an even more complete cluster part, they had to limit the way you can time travel, because you can't time travel back to the events of the first game because reasons. Otherwise, even though that will make a much more interesting type of storytelling. Anyway,
But Theo,
for this one. Yes, back from Shadow Dimensions are the free fall sections where Miguel will dive into these huge tunnel shafts and just sprint towards it. These are much worse than in Shadow Dimensions. The controls somehow are even worse. You're like on a grid, and you're way too fast for to dodge sometimes object placement, which can become even cheap. The first couple of freefall sections at least ease up things, but the bullshit starts ramping up pretty soon.
Allow me, Dwibs, help me out here.
Oh.
How?
Okay. Sir, why does it say in the archaeological plans that you want a giant shaft that's completely empty and for there to be floating blocks that anyone could just smack into if they happen to be falling? And also, why did you include for there to be literal web of wires here and there?
This is for my assault course.
Assault course? But, sir, this is in the general public vicinity.
Well, sometimes the general public might feel like being daring and taking a risk.
And what's this about a curved part of the building?
That's part of it.
It's kind of funny.
And what's this about a part that is literally a vagina shape?
My designer felt horny one day.
It's kind of funny, Jova, because in the credits, you can lie very easily, but I basically cut off to when I died in this game, I basically cut off to the point where it was before I died, so we're not gonna spend too much time on stuff. But no, it's funny you mentioned, Joe, because in the credits, we're gonna try to put a lampshade on the fact that this freefall section make no sense at all, because Miguel calculates that he's going through a certain speed, a couple of meters per second, and since these are so long, he concludes that the entire Archmax building should be taller than the Mount Everest.
It doesn't make a lick of sense, like...
At all.
And you want to know what's great to prolong the sequence? They have time just sporadically changing even though Peter didn't do anything.
Don't do that.
Yeah, here's another thing I don't like about this story. Changes to the time stream continuum just happen at random.
Okay. Question for you, Shiroi. Between the motion blur and the blooming effect, I can imagine this is a pain in the ass to watch for you.
A bit. And especially the way, that we're moving right now. Jesus Christ.
I mean, the change of perspective, I guess, is right, because it's been constantly a stable Spider-Man. The idea that using,
I'm not talking about the camera. I mean the actual character movements there.
Oh, okay. But yeah. Oh, I also haven't explained the balls of what they mean. They mentioned this briefly in the tutorial, but basically these give you either a bunch of experience points, refill your health, or your shield meter. Basically, Miguel has a different health system than Peter. Peter has a straightforward health bar that regenerates over time. Miguel has half of an health bar, but an entire segment of his life bar as a shield. It's a bit complicated, but until you have actually replenished it, or it has regenerated completely, the damage that you take from the shield puts you back in terms of maximum health at the point where it does damage less. So say that your health is at 50%, when at the halfway point of the HUD that you see before. You take damage to the 30%, then your shield regenerates immediately, and then you take more damage, but your maximum health stacks still at 30%, not at 50%. It can become tricky for later sections, in particular the freefall ones, because damage becomes much more punishing. And the way to counter this, the holographic imagery that you've seen in the first part, can only get you so far. Sure, it makes you practically invincible, and it breaks the game at some point, but later in the game you become extremely dependent on it to survive. With Miguel. Peter gets it gets a bit more scot-free as a result, but he compensates that with a more limited moveset.
So, Tia, were you like me and preferred playing as Peter in this game?
Honestly, no. I still prefer Miguel overall. He's kind of a glass cannon in that kind of sense. Mostly because, one, 2099 BS, and two, the fact that he's much more fun to play compared to, in Shadow Dimension. I mentioned this previously. Shadow Dimension, Miguel is probably the weakest in terms of character to play as, because his gimmick wasn't useful at all. It was cool only to dodge missiles at certain point, but it wasn't that much practical. He had the most odds stacked against him, and most of his villains were not that interesting. So here it's a bit better, he's much integrated in the plot. Christopher Nolan does a better job in giving him personality and all,
I guess for me, I just preferred Peter Parker because his gameplay sections felt less troublesome than Miguel's as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Miguel's got those BS free-falling sequences, which I feel are quite possibly the worst of them in the game. And a lot of his sequences, maybe it's because he's in the quote-unquote high-tech future, but a lot of his gameplay sequences feel like they have some of the least dynamic changes to them, which is ironic because you'd think that the future would be the thing changing the most in, a game about time travel. Seeing as how simple cause and effect dictates that the past should be what affects the future. But no, we can't have nice things like...
Not just that, look at how many enemies have I found in this fucking room. Like, this is not Dynasty Warriors, Beanox, come on!
Jesus Christ. So, Tio...
You want to have a superhero game that functions much more like a beat-em-up? Do, again, what Raven Software did with Logan, with X-Men Origins Wolverine, or someone else, but it's much more designed for direct combat in a much more, rabbit way. Spider-Man is more suited for agility and platforming.
Or hell, do what Spider-Man 2 did when a lot of people gang up on you. You had a lot of web tricks that you could use to counter or had to use certain enemies against others. Whereas with here, it's just blatant beat-em-up action.
Spider-Man PS4 understands this to a T, because you're not just punching enemies relentlessly. You have to integrate your tricks and in your webbing into your combos.
Yeah.
So, Tio, why don't you give us a refresher course on why you like 2099?
In general, well, I mentioned this in Shadow Dimension, but it's a good reminder. I generally like the idea that of the concept alone. It's essentially Marvel trying to do the sci-fi cyberpunk things that you see in stories like Blade Runner or Ghost in the Shell, the classic city immersed in the dark, full of neon imagery, a dystopic future ruled by mega corporations, but with certain people that still retain hope to build a better society, and their determination, in their struggles against said corporations. Although my personal favorite story is about Doom 2099,
I thought which is
more of I mentioned this already too in the past. Doom 2099 is my favorite comic book line of all time. In general, it's such I was already a fan of the character in the 616 universe, but 2099 captured the spirit and puts it even more up with the setting in such a great way.
It's interesting. You pit Doom against actual dictators ruling the city and see his own take on stuff here and there.
Not just that, it builds a legitimate mystery, because unlike other characters who are legacy characters, Miguel is not Peter Parker in the future. He's a different person that has heard of Peter's escapades and just wanted to do his own thing, imitating him and all. I'll mention later, because we're now almost at the climax of the first act. Miguel is on destination, but Peter has to arrive yet.
Hey, you're responsible for the explosions.
Oh no.
Trying to blow you up. If you were really trying, you'd have done it. What's going on? Kill you.
Also, Anti-Venom looks skinny for his appearance. He will become bulkier later on, but here he just looks uncannily skinny. Oh no, this is not good.
Oh dear.
There you go.
He's trying to drain him. That's sort
Again,
of Anti-Venom's thing.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the first part, I think. when Anti-Venom does that, it gives you the sook. So that means that he's absorbing your powers, no matter what. But he's specializing against other symbionts and Spider-Man's powers. So Peter always has to be worried about him when he's around. Which actually is a good time to mention for me. Go on, sorry.
I remember, Venom being invisible to a spider since from the 2000 game, or is that a common thing?
It has been a constant since the introduction of Venom. It is a nice introduction of a new concept for Peter, an enemy that knows him so much that knows a way to bypass his spider sense, making it a much more dangerous threat. Because Peter had been reliant on his spider sense for a lot of time, so this was certainly a game changer. So I actually like that, but forgot if I mentioned this already, but the thing about this is that Anti-Venom had barely been introduced in the Marvel comics until this point. Also, that's a nice imagery. But, so basically, this game is not friendly even for comic book fans, not just new ones. Anti-Venom just shows up. Peter mentioned that he's Eddie Brock. But you don't know how he became Anti-Venom or what are his capabilities until they mention them directly. And apparently he is also fond of explosions. What the heck?
It doesn't help that in the context of this story, imagine you don't know what Anti-Venom is. Okay, he's Eddie Brock. Why is he Anti-Venom? If you're hoping for this game to explain, well, best hope you...
Oh my god,
actually, no,
shut up!
Actually, no, even if you did read the comics, because I'm not quite sure, but I think at this time, the whole Anti-Venom thing was a lot more of a mystery even in the comics still.
No, it was legitimately, almost introduced around this point.
So this is literally a trend chaser, or maybe...
not just that, no, a publicity stunt. This was just publicity. But... so yeah, honestly, it doesn't even help that Shadow Dimension barely had the symbionts in it. It had Carnage, sure, for the Ultimate Universe, but 616 had nothing, not Venom at all. So this was a bit out of nowhere. But anyway, let me continue briefly what I was mentioning. I like other characters like Miguel in the 2019 universe who are legacy characters from their past incarnations, or some original characters like Ravage 2099. Doom... Apparently, there's this mystery going on that Doom 2099 may be the same Doctor Doom, because he just shows up in the 2099 universe, classic costume and all. He suffers from amnesia. He doesn't know what happened to him, and throughout the entire line, you have the mystery of is he the real Doctor Doom or just someone that thinks he is. And at the end, it doesn't matter at all. So again, it also keeps this new element of mystery even for the 2009 line. Such a unique and smart comic, and I love it.
Oh yeah, I really like that one.
So Teo, I'm actually wondering, the fact that Shadow the Hedgehog tries to rip it off, maybe that's kind of why you have a soft spot for Shadow the Hedgehog?
Well, you know, Pedro, I'm also I'm a 90s person. Yeah, I have the imagining side still, so...
See, Shadow the Hedgehog is one of those dark and edgy games, but it still remembers what series it's from, so it makes sure to keep some of those necks here and there, which helps it be, at worst, a guilty pleasure, I'd say.
Well, considering I wasn't able to finish the fucking thing, I'm not sure.
Well, that has more to do with the gameplay,
Well, yeah.
No, the gameplay in Shadow the Hedgehog is exhausting.
Hold on, Java. Okay, these fucking banter.
Also, you're suggesting that he's never been anyone's patsy?
Yeah,
really?
apparently it introduced the idea that Eddie has a mind control chip inside him. Even never mind the fact that he doesn't really need them to have a grudge against Peter at all.
I guess to be fair, at this point in the timeline, he's supposed to be sort of on better terms with Peter Parker.
And the scuffling guess what? Even again for the bullshit.
No, okay,
yeah,
this is
chrono convergence thingy. Apparently, that explosion means that in 99 years, no one will fucking change those reactors, meaning that Miguel is now in danger, and now Peter has to basically just rush quickly and try to change all of them.
This is so goddamn stupid. What kind of company has a leak like that for 99 years and doesn't change the blipping thing? Oh, you know what's even better though? You gotta go to different rooms to fix each of those containers here. So you're telling me that this was an accident that probably affected, at the very least, several sections of the building, and no one thought, sir, maybe we should fix this?
Nope. Just keep it in. We're saving on cost.
We've got time. We've got time.
You see this about so you see this video there. We could fix those issues, but unfortunately, the money that we put aside to fix those issues, I had to spend on my boss's supply of wingerdingers. Yeah, that's
We're
it.
gonna need to be.
I totally didn't spend them on I totally didn't spend them on cider. No, I didn't. No.
Well, sir, we're gonna need to be saving up for a lawyer then. Do you know how many lawsuits we're gonna get from employees on this matter?
Alright, last one.
Again,
Well,
again.
by the time they get around to getting them, they'll probably all die in those accidents. So we should be fine.
That's totally.
It would be such a problem if this person were to have an unfortunate accident.
And there you go, future saved by completely arbitrary.
Don't worry,
methods.
Miguel. You're still sterile now.
Oh, you're playing this on Steam.
No, PS3.
Oh, weird. Those look a lot like how the Steam.
No,
tab-
those are PS3 trophies. Again, blind playthrough, so means I got the trophies on the first run.
How does that look
Also,
like
it's sound effects.
the notifications for trophies for achievements that are on Steam come from the bottom right corner, not from the.
Like they have a different jingle altogether, Joe.
Well, technically you can customize where they appear from, but I see what you mean though. It's just that they look like the same gray scale text box sort of thing, but I get what you mean.
I mean, my Steam window looks black, so I don't really get that. But
No.
No, but there
the
can be some customization in how you do that, Pedro.
I guess, sure.
Punch.
That's also,
But no, that's the
another
thing.
That's also another thing that I didn't mention. It's a nice touch, actually. When Peter actually punches in combats, he uses the webbed fist, like in the PS1 game where we were a power up. So again,
we don't have to use webbed fists in that one.
No. They were like a power up that you could occasionally get, but here it's like a permanent thing that he uses them. But again, it's a nice reference. Again, it contributes to the theory that each new Spider-Man game, even if it's handled by a different company, it's just keeps something from the previous ones. All right, see you for the next part where we face Anti-Venom.
All right.
See ya.
See ya.